We are the Kinsella Trust, a knife crime prevention charity. In this series, we'll be talking to a variety of people who have all been affected by knife crime. They'll be sharing their stories with us, telling us how they managed to cope with such tragedy and what they're doing now to help end knife crime. Some of the topics that we'll be discussing may be upsetting, so listener caution is advised. We'll be sharing some helpful links at the end of the session. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today and giving up your time to talk about something so sensitive. Before we start to talk about what happened, please do give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are.
First of all, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
It feels amazing to be here. I feel like, honoured, to be fair. So I'm Tyler West. I'm a DJ and TV and radio presenter. And I'm 28. I'm from South London. I was born and bred there. And it's been quite a journey over the last, 14 years to get to this point of where we are now, which obviously we're going to talk about today. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster, to say the least.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Interesting career. Where did you said in South London you grew up. Where did you grow up around South London?
So I grew up on St Helier Estate. So it's in Carshalton. So it's not far from Croydon.
Yeah.
It's down that way. And I grew up on like a really sort of, I'd say, racist council estate. Okay. It was like just me, my mum, my brother. And it just was, I don't know how to describe it. It was, you kind of, everybody in that area can't really see much further outside of it. Like that was just all we knew. It's just everybody around is kind of doing the same thing. My mum worked in the NHS her whole life, was a hard-working nurse and stuff. And we just did what we could to get by. It was really sort of tough. Back then it was, as I said, a single mum bringing up two boys with five-year age gap. But she did an amazing job. And I feel like I was actually, even though we didn't have much, like we had food in the cupboards just about, and we had a roof over our heads. And we just made do with what we could.
Well, you're testament to your mum's hard work.
She is, honestly, like, I'll tell you obviously in the story, but my mum has been with me. Like there's some relationships that you have with your parents, and my mum has been like almost like the father figure as well, in a sense. Yeah. Like she was there throughout my whole childhood, obviously. But also she's been like my guidance and my protector, and has like literally made me the man I am today. So all the work I do now, if you would have told me when I was little, like, oh yeah, Shy Tyler's going to be talking on the radio or dancing in front of millions of people on telly or on the TV every day. If you'd have said to me any of those things, I would have said, nah, absolutely not. Really? Like I was the shyest kid. I always hid behind my brother. He was like the confident footballer, the basketball player, the singer. He just like could walk into a room and he was my voice growing up. So we had such like a sort of close-knit family, like with me, my mum, my brother. And I thought that was like my destiny. Like I was just going to be the shy kid. That was it. Everybody always knew, oh, is Tyler all right? No, he's just shy. That was me growing up. So
what did you want to be growing up then?
I wanted to be a firefighter on a Monday. I wanted to be a police officer on a Wednesday. I wanted to go and do some film directing on a Friday. Like I was obsessed with movies as a kid growing up, right? So movies was for me like my escape. Like I used to just get my homework finished at school so I could run home, stick the telly on and just watch loads of whatever VHS we've got. Whether it's Indiana Jones, I used to rinse all the Indiana Jones movies. I was like a proper little geeky kid sat there with my rich tea biscuits.
Sounds perfect, to be honest.
It was a dream, to be fair. I'm downplaying it. I lived my best life running back. Cup of tea, rich tea biscuits, and that was me practically throughout my whole childhood. I was just that shy kid, but I wasn't quite convinced on what I wanted to do when I grew up. I knew I liked sport quite a bit, so maybe going into like physiotherapy and stuff like that, to be honest, but it never ended up happening that way.
It never does it? And to be honest, but you've got such a variety of a career now that you are fulfilling those childhood dreams, that you want to do these things on a Monday, do that on a Wednesday, and do something else on a Friday.
It's a bit of a mix-up. And I tell you what, the weird thing is, and this is why I feel so passionately about talking about knife crime and opening up about my story, is because I wouldn't actually do any of the things I do today if I hadn't have witnessed what I did.
Okay.
And it's crazy how the full circle moment happens and how it all links together. Like, I'm so grateful for, one, the fact that, you know, I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm living and breathing, but also two, the journey it's taken me on to like grow into the man that I am, and the career that I do with the friends that I have in the place that I live now. It's just completely different.
Yeah. But it takes some getting through that traumatic event, going through that adversity to actually recognize, wow, that actually did shape my future, and to be able to take some positive aspects from those experiences. And we'll come on to that in a moment. But you said, you know, as a childhood, your mum was hardworking, you had your brother, you were the shy boy. But you said you grew up on an estate that was perhaps steeped in racism.
Yeah, it was quite like, me and my brother are like pretty much the only black kids there. There was a lot of gang violence, drugs being dealt. It was like there was not much opportunity when you looked around. Like, I didn't walk out my house and feel inspired. It was like, all right, let's go down to the park, and then, oh, when you see this dodgy guy come down the road, it's like, all right, now let's go home. It was kind of like a lot of alcoholics, local alcoholics, and people just not really up to much, basically. And even that sort of transpired some throughout my school years as well. Like, it's being in and around those environments. But again, they were all experiences that then prepared me for where I was going to go later on in life.
Yeah.
So, you know, that I would like to say that obviously I'm well away from that area now in terms of like where I am in my life. But I just didn't let my environment sort of decide where I was going to end up, because we could have easily got caught up with the wrong people or ended up going down the wrong route, but we never let that happen.
That's amazing. How did it feel then growing up in an area perhaps where you didn't feel very safe?
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. Like, it's meant to be what you call home, and it still is, you know. Like, I still say, oh yeah, I'm going to go home and see mum, and like, because mum's still sort of based in the same area. But I feel like a lot has changed since I was younger now, and I feel like the world's changed a little bit more. It's made it a little bit easier to digest. But still, it wasn't comfortable in the slightest. But those are the sort of experiences, like we were saying a little bit earlier about adversity, like those challenges right there that you go through genuinely shape you to be a person that's well equipped for the outside world, no matter what comes your way. So all of those experiences there, I sit there and go, do you know what? It's a blessing and a lesson. Like, it really is in some sense. Like, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody or any person of colour to go through any of those experiences there. But at the same time, I don't shy away from, like, I don't try and cover up the fact that it happened.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you're so open and able to talk about what happened to you. And specifically, you're here today to talk about something that happened in your childhood that you now feel able to talk about quite openly. So whenever you're ready, if you'd like to describe, you know, the situation, what happened and how it played out.
So it's about 14 years ago now. I was 14 at the time, and I was at school, and there was like an after school club that I was at. It was like a sort of dance club sort of thing, like street dance. Street dance, the movie just came out, so I was like, oh, I'm obsessed trying to be Channing Tatum.
I'm doing that now.
Step up, yeah. Didn't look like that at all. But anyway, I went across to this after school club just one time, and then literally I lived on the same road as my school, but it was a very, very long road. Like, you could get a bus up all the way to the other end. So then I've got the bus up, and I'm on the phone to mum as I'm getting off the bus, and she's like, oh, Ty, I don't know how to work the skybox, like, it's not working. I was like, mum, I'll be home in a second. And that's at like I think it was about 8:45. I'm now getting home, just walking up, and then as I'm on the phone to mum, like literally directly opposite our house, there was like these three of them, these like local alcoholics that lived across the road, but they were having an argument out on the pavement. And then I've then come in the house, went and dumped my bag upstairs, and just being a nosy neighbour, I was like, oh, they're arguing. Let me just turn the light off and open the blind.
Yeah.
So now I'm watching this argument go on, and I shouted down the stairs to mum. I was like, oh, mum, they're arguing. Like, I think they're getting a bit aggressive. And mum was like, oh, I'm going to call the police again. I called the police on them earlier. So mum's then downstairs, and then in the time between mum's downstairs getting the house phone to call the police and report what's going on, it was like a 2-on-1 argument with the three men. And one of the two men what looked like it threw like a really weak punch to the man that was standing on its own. And then the man that got hit started stumbling all over the place and then started like sort of running from the opposite side of the street towards my house, but like stumbling. And it looked like he was on the phone. And then all of a sudden just fell flat on his face in the road. Then the two men then walked over to the man. And as he came into the street light, he had a 12-inch kitchen knife in his hand.
Wow.
And then from that moment, he then turned the body over and he wasn't on the phone. He was holding his neck and his neck was cut wide open. And then for what went on after that, by that point, then my mum's there with me at my bedroom window watching this. And her phone calls turned into, you know, reporting these men having an argument, like a simple, honest argument, to then, oh my gosh, he's got a knife. Oh my gosh, he's stabbing him. And there was about 36 puncture wounds and 42 slash wounds that went on for this.
My goodness.
What it seemed, I think my mum's phone call to the police was just under 10 minutes. So this ordeal went on for like a good 6 minutes, where one man was stabbing him and the other man was kicking the body. And this went on and on and on. And it seemed like it went on for an hour. And I just couldn't believe that me and mum were the only ones watching this. And there's not, like, for a council estate, a busy neighbourhood at some of the times, there was nobody walking past. There was no cars driving past, nothing like that. It was literally just us. And obviously my mum, I mentioned my mum was a nurse. So her natural instinct was, oh, let me go get some towels.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to, like, help at some point. And then the two men went inside his flat, which was across the road. So the man's body's still in the road. And then mum's went to go out there. And then the two men came back out the flat as mum's went to go out there. And I've dragged mum back in the house. I said, you can't go out there. They're like, they've come back over and they're trying to put the body in a bag. Then that wasn't working. So they gave up and just went inside the flat.
Who tried to put the body in a bag?
The two men.
Oh my goodness.
So this is all going on. The police still haven't arrived at this point. And then me and mum, they finally go inside the flat and me and mum come out and mum's trying to do CPR whilst on the phone to the police, and there was just too much blood.
Yeah.
And I was standing there, literally as close as we are now. And I just remember, I'll never forget that sight of seeing a man's life getting like taken in front of me. Like that has never left my mind, the back of my mind, like right any day since this happened.
Yeah.
And then I remember about 20 minutes after that, waking up on the sofa with paramedics around me. My brother screaming down the other end of the road where they'd cordoned it off. And they arrested the two men.
Yeah.
And then that day, I didn't know, but that day would just change my life forever.
Yeah. Like
completely change who I am as a person, change everything that I thought I knew, everything, things that would affect me that I didn't even think would affect me ever.
Yeah.
And that's how then, that was sort of how the whole situation transpired to then 14 years later, I'm sat here talking to you about it.
It's incredible what you've experienced, and at such a young age as well. And to have your mum there and being so close to home, it's your doorstep, a place of sanctuary. Yeah,
I mean, following on from that, there was, when was it? It was literally, I think, the day after I had to go through this whole process at a young age of going to a police station, doing an ID parade, giving a statement.
Yeah.
And then after that the busyness of like dealing with the police happened, it's just like, all right, cool, you're just meant to go back to normal life now. And now my problem is, what I didn't know that then was about to happen to me is that my mental health took a battering and I couldn't process it. So my mum and me, both as like, I witnessed it all from the start. Mum obviously came up in the time that the man was stabbing the body. I didn't want to talk about it at all. I was like, no, I'm gonna bury it. I'm just gonna keep like burying it. I don't want to go to school. I was like, I didn't want to leave my bedroom. I wouldn't open the blind. Whereas my mum was like, oh, but I keep going through the details in her head, and she kept wanting to talk about it. But every single time she spoke about it, it upset me. So we was like the worst people to be around. She was like my protector, you know, my guidance. So it was really hard, sort of trying to process it, and I didn't process it at that time. I kept sweeping it under the carpet. And that was probably my biggest regret, because I could have dealt with it if I'd have had the help and the access,
Yeah.
I could have dealt with it a lot easier to then make the next 2 years after that point a lot more bearable, because I didn't come out my bedroom. I missed out on a lot of like my GCSEs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, and even when I had to forcefully leave the house, I wouldn't walk on that side of the street. I'd have to walk on the other side of the street. I couldn't use a knife and fork at dinner. I couldn't be around anybody that was drinking alcohol, anybody that was associated with drugs, anybody that would start like getting violent or aggressive. I couldn't be around any of that because I'd be convinced that somebody's going to die. Somebody's life is going to be taken.
Yeah.
And the knock-on effect that all had on me, and it was so detrimental to the point that then I didn't want to be here. Like I was so young, and I'm sitting there like, I'm literally in my bedroom. I'm not coming out. Like this is like such a low point. And I felt like it matured me in a different type of way. I didn't feel like a kid anymore. I felt like I was like, I haven't got no purpose. I don't know what to do. This isn't getting easier. And it all happened at a weird time, because there was like my mum and my stepdad at the time broke up. I lost my granddad shortly after. It was like 2010 was like one of the worst years of my life, no doubt. And then obviously following on from that, there was this whole court case that we had to deal with. So the minute that you then start to get over it a little bit, so there was a new knife crime law that came in 2010, which meant life imprisonment for using a bladed article, murder with a bladed article. And then this big court case has obviously come up at the Old Bailey, and I'm literally like the key witness. Dealing with that process there's some things that happened in my experience which actually made my situation a million times worse.
Yeah.
There was stuff with the Crown Prosecution Service, there was stuff with the police that they didn't protect from me. My biggest thing at that age was like, I don't want these murderers to know who I am. And then all of a sudden we're doing it. I had to do it via video link because I was underage.
Yes.
I'm there with a chaperone. The chaperone hands me this book, and the defence starts saying to me, "Oh, Tyler, can you turn to page 89 of this evidence portfolio?" So now I'm going through, and on page 1, I see the knife.
Oh my goodness.
On page 2, I see the body.
Yeah.
On page 3, I see inside the house with the other knives.
Yeah.
I start seeing all of these images, which now I can't get out of my head, and has made me upset there and then in the moment. And then we have a little break, and I said to the chaperone, I was like, "Oh, can they see me in the courtroom?" And my mum and my dad and my brother, like my whole family, were there in the courtroom in the gallery, and all of these plasma screens come out of the walls, and obviously the guys are sat there and they can see everything.
Yeah.
And they can see me getting upset on this video link. They know exactly who I am. They can look right at me, and I was just like, this is going completely exactly the opposite of how I would ever want it to go.
Yeah.
If I'm ever in that situation.
Feeling so vulnerable.
It was horrible.
And being a child at the same time.
Yeah. It was really hard.
So thank you for sharing that awful experience, and it's had such a profound effect on your life, as you said. If we just go back to when it happened, you said that it affected every aspect of your life, and it really affected your mental health as well, that you were having moments where you didn't want to be there. Could you explain that a little bit more, please?
That was probably like one of the low points where I became, I developed like some form of like OCD, in the sense that I had certain things that I had to do in my day. And it sounds so silly when I say it out loud, but at the time I was so convinced that this was the truth. And it was like, if I hadn't have got up, and it was like, I had to like make my bed, I had to walk a certain route if I wanted to get to the school. I had to, there was like, what was other little things? Like, the blinds still wouldn't open. The blinds always had to be shut. All of these things if they didn't go to plan, I was convinced I was going to die. Yeah. I was convinced somebody was going to kill me. I don't know when, I don't know where, whether it happens naturally or whether it happens with somebody like just coming up to me and stabbing me. Yeah. I was convinced through and through that was what was going to be my sort of how I'm going to end up. I could not get it out of my head.
And that is such a normal response to seeing something so violent and so traumatic. That loss of control in life, and seeing how life is so quickly taken away from us. What a natural response for you to think, I need to get some sort of control back in my life. So you said you felt like you had some sort of traits of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
That's a really natural trauma response as well. So all of those things that you said sound completely a natural thing to take place
Yeah.
after witnessing something so violent.
It adds into. I'm still at therapy to this day.
Yeah.
I think I'm a big advocate for therapy. I'm like,
Yeah.
it never worked for me. Kind of when I was around a teenager, because it was through the NHS, it was through CAMS, and
Yeah.
it was just I kind of felt like they were looking at the clock, waiting for the next person.
Okay.
And I really struggled to open up anyway. I was a kind of a shy kid anyway. So I found other ways to deal with it back then. But even now, like even when I talk to my therapist, like what I didn't realize is like my level of attachment issues, and some of that is derived from the fact in my life I'm convinced that, you know, I've seen a man's life get taken in an instant. I'm like, well, the reason I struggle to let people in so much is because I'm scared they're just going to go.
So easy to lose them.
It's so hard. So I struggle with grief. I struggle with like attachment with people, and like as soon as somebody's close to me, I'm like, yeah, they're my people now. Like I'm close to them. Like that's it, and I can look after them. And I've kind of taken on this like protective role in a sense. So I'm in a completely different, obviously, space and mindset to when I was 14. But I feel like also at the time, I felt so vulnerable and weak, and like if that man had come to me now, like I'm a bigger guy now, I'm 6'3", I go to the gym every day, I'm like, I can defend myself, I know I can. Whereas at 14, I felt helpless. I couldn't help my mum, I couldn't help the guy in the street, I couldn't do anything.
Your brain's completely different at that age as well. It's a lot to process. You're going through massive developmental changes as a teenager, not quite understanding the emotions you're feeling and why you're feeling those emotions. Whereas when you have therapy, you know, moving on into adulthood, you have that, perhaps that emotional intelligence where you can understand and you can reflect and understand why you've had those reactions. So you said the court case was really quite upsetting as well, and it sort of resurfaced a lot of those feelings. And that led to you having quite a couple of quite difficult years, you said?
Yeah. One thing that happened in the court case, which still to this day I struggle to process, is as I said in the story, there was two men that obviously committed the murder. One of the men was holding the knife, doing all the stabbing, and the other man was kicking the body. But as a 14-year-old testifying against them, I said in the court, I successfully identified them in an ID parade. I said exactly what happened on the night, and they tried to say, "Oh, do you reckon like some of the information could be skewed or things like that? Are you sure you remember this?" And they were really putting me under pressure at the Old Bailey. And then I just told them, I told them the reality of my situation. I was like, "Look, I haven't left my bedroom. I'm scared from the moment I wake up to the moment I go sleep." I was like, I'm not processing things. And the judge took all this into consideration. So the man that actually got sentenced, he got life imprisonment and an extra, say, it's something like 320 days for putting a traumatic memory in a 14-year-old's head.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Then the other man got rehoused to the other side of Croydon.
Right.
And so there wasn't enough evidence. Apparently my voice wasn't enough, and what I saw wasn't enough.
Yeah. And how did that feel?
Oh, today, gutting.
Yeah.
Like still gutting to this day, because I don't think anybody has a right in this world to do that to another human being.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do it, then you deserve the consequences. And I just felt like, yeah, your voice isn't heard when it comes to those things. So that's why I feel like nowadays, when it comes to talking about knife crime, I feel like everybody needs to talk about it and normalize it in the sense of like it being a safe space to talk about.
Yeah.
Because back then it wasn't for me. And I felt very lonely, and anybody that can hear somebody else talking about their experience, whether you've witnessed domestic violence, whether you've witnessed a fight in a pub or like something like that, there are so many things that can be so easy to trigger you. So it's just about talking and making the environment a little bit more comfortable for people to be able to open up.
Tyler, up until recently, you hadn't really spoken to anyone about what you'd witnessed and what you've experienced. Why now?
Because I feel like I've got a platform now, and I've got almost like a duty to be able to say, hey, to any other and also to my own 14-year-old self back then, saying, hey, listen, it's going to be okay. Like I feel like the more voices that are able to talk about their experiences and how they've turned it around gives confidence to other people, and belief as well that things will be able to change and that things can get better. I mean, I was 14 at the time when I witnessed it. I was inside for like 2 years practically, and then I started going back to school through sport. I started playing handball.
Okay.
And when I started playing handball at school, really like niche sport, I used to play basketball quite a bit, but they started teaching me handball, and then all of a sudden I got into the South England squad.
Wow.
And then I got into the England squad.
For handball?
And then I got into the Great Britain squad.
Who knew?
I know, exactly. And then it was during a training session for Great Britain that CBBC came in to interview us about how kids can get involved in the sport. And I did like 30 seconds on camera, and they were like, "Oh, you're quite good at presenting. You ever thought about it?"
Wow.
And I'm like, "Well, nah." And then they offered me a guest presenting slot on CBBC on the show, and I got a little taste of TV presenting. I was like, "You know what, Mum? I want to do this forever." So I finished my studies, worked at a youth centre, and then whilst trying to get into telly, and then finally made that jump onto CBBC. And then fast forward 10 years now, I've now got a national radio show. I've done Strictly. I've done like all of those like cool achievements.
Yeah.
But this is coming from like the Tyler that didn't have a voice when I was 14 to now, like, you can't shut me up. It's a bit of a problem, all right? I'm a bit annoyed.
It's not a problem. This is the Tyler you always should have been.
Yeah, it's just, so it's, I think I always say, you know, taking your negatives and using it as your fuel to drive you to where you want to go. I feel like that's what I've done, and I would love other people to do that, whatever situation you're going through in life. You know, it might be family issues, it might be fallouts, it might be breakups, whatever it is. You know, you might be like my mum was, just a single mum trying to get by. Whatever it is, you can keep going. And it's just like about not losing hope and knowing that it will pass. Like it literally is just, it's a phase. It's just a cloud going over.
And it's hard to see that, isn't it, when you're in the thick of it? It's hard to see that it will pass.
Yeah.
And there will be brighter days again. And knowing that there are other people that you can talk to. And you said that you've had therapy since, and that's helped you massively.
Yeah, it has.
With everything. So when we look at violence and we think about knife crime, what do you think the solutions are, or what can we do to solve the problem of knife crime?
It's really hard because people compare to other countries around the world. Like people say, "Oh, look, there's no crime going in the Middle East because it's stricter laws over there." But then some people are like, "Oh yeah, but in America it's gun violence and things," and it's like accessibility. I feel like there's so many moving parts when it comes to knife crime. I feel like talking about it for one and making awareness because it's back then, I mean, this was the hard thing. When I was 14 and this was coming out, we was changing laws, and the figures were like almost on a bit of a roller coaster, going up and down, up and down. So that, I don't know if that worked. So then you talk about how easy it is nowadays for somebody to go out and buy a knife. I feel like there's part of the problem of it being so accessible. And people feeling like they need to, what they say, it's like 9 times out of 10 defending themselves. Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of sort of intervention to happen, and it's like the powers above, the government. I feel like there's a due diligence, a responsibility there for them to take. Yeah. To be able to get it under control, because knife crime was, you know, it was still rife then, and it's still rife now, and it hasn't changed. It's not going anywhere. So it's like how, especially like even in the news recently, with what's gone on in Southport, with what even happened. I was on my way to my radio studio the other day. A knife attack happened in Leicester Square. Yeah. And it's all of these situations. It's almost like it needs to be there every single day in front of your face for people to be talking about it or actually wanting to do something about it. And I feel like that idea needs to just go. It needs to be spoken about more. Even if you didn't have a knife attack for like 3 weeks, then it's still not gone away. The numbers still haven't changed. There still hasn't been any development. Yeah. So talking about it, raising awareness for sure.
Do you think education helps at all?
Absolutely. I feel like it's a key player in the situation to make a difference. From my own experience, I mean, like as a kid growing up, the thing that kept me from not getting involved with in and around any of those crowds, even though it was right there in front of my face on my estate, was the fact that I had a purpose. Like I had, like sport was the hook for me. Yeah. I was like, those local community clubs, youth clubs are like a key ingredient to making sure a child can have a dream, a vision, accessibility to resources, whether that be computers, whether it be studios, like I don't know, whatever a child would want to go on and experiment with, that all of a sudden can trigger a whole different path for that one child. So community hubs are really vital and important. And also, I'd say supporting, like, it sounds so silly, but even if you see something you like, so say for example, the Kinsella Trust might share a post about knife crime. It's like keeping that awareness up is so, we've got access to social media now.
Yeah.
It's like, just share the post.
Yeah.
Just share
Like
the post,
it,
forward
share
it
it.
on, like it, share it, and just sort of keep the momentum going, because otherwise it's not gonna move.
Yeah.
The earlier that kids can learn about the effects of knife crime, the less likely they are to get involved in it, and the more aware they are of it as well, the more they can protect themselves, and the more they can also diffuse other situations of anybody. If, you know, there was some stupid remarks that my friends used to come out with at school, and I'm like, that's not the way forward. So the earlier that we can start implementing that, and I feel like education's the one sort of vessel to be able to do that.
Witnessing that violence in your community, it hasn't been easy for you, and it's still very profoundly part of your life, and it has shaped the way your life has, the trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
What would you say to a person if they thought about picking up a knife?
It doesn't just affect you and the person you're about to stab. It's a ripple effect and affects a whole community around it. I was like, that one knife isn't just affecting, it isn't just taking a life. It's taking a part of a load of people in that situation. Something that's irreplaceable. Like I will never get back those 2 years that I had in my bedroom.
Yeah. Tyler, thank you so much for coming along and talking to us today.
It's been a pleasure.
And carry on doing what you're doing, all your fabulous work.
Absolutely. I'll keep supporting, and thank you so much for having me and listening to my story.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our wonderful guests for sharing their experience. And thank you too for listening to the Ben Kinsella Trust podcast. If you've been affected by knife crime or have been a victim of crime, you can get support from victimsupport.org.uk or from supportline.org.uk. And Catch 22 also offer victim support services in some areas. For help with bereavement, visit cruise.org.uk, and Mind offer a range of mental health support services at mind.org.uk. Finally, to find out more about the Ben Kinsella Trust and the services we offer, visit our own website at benkinsella.org.uk. We can't solve knife crime until everyone recognises this issue and their own role within it. So please help us by sharing this podcast with friends and family on your social media or WhatsApp groups. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can stop knife crime.